Hurricane Lee is moving up the coast offshore, and we've got warnings up for eastern New England as well as Atlantic Canada. We'll be talking about that and taking a look at what is actually some fairly nice weather that's on the other side of that. That is over, or at least today, it was over much of the Northeast and Great Lakes and Ohio Valley. We'll also address whatever issues might be in the long range, and we will do that momentarily right here on tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. Mulch, topsoil, sand, salt this coming winter. And, of course, anything you need to make sure your home can get through a tropical storm or a hurricane, or even just the day-to-day stuff. 631-756-1125. They've got the best prices anywhere. The website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
Tempest by Weatherflow, Joe. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system and join the fastest-growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. And if you purchase anything on the Tempest Weather site, be it the Tempest Weather Station or any of the other gadgets that they have, and also some smart weather fashion, use the coupon code I Want a Weather Station. And if you do,
you'll get 10% off. And where else can you get something like that?
Yeah, exactly. All right, I'm a half a step behind tonight for some odd reason.
I mean, if you were to call some company that offers you a weather station, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you call up and you say, I want a weather station. And the person on the other end says
you want a weather station. Think of what do I want? How come it's always what you want, not what I want?
No, what I'm going to say is, you say to the person on the other end, I want a weather station. And that person says, all right, I'm going to put you on hold. You talk to the next person and tell them that you want a lower price.
Oh, God, yeah. I'll explain that momentarily, folks. Welcome to everybody tonight on watching the Joe and Joe Weather Show, whether you are on the chat board as the regulars are, and a few new people here and there, or you're lurking in the background, because we know those sneaky folks at SPC and WPC and somebody over at NWS at Upton. Well, they're kind of out there. They don't always make themselves known. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you too can watch the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is on every day, Sunday through Thursday. We consider that every day at 7:35 p.m. We are usually off Fridays and Saturdays, but there will be, so just letting everybody know, we will do we're not going to do a show tomorrow night. Rather, we'll do it Saturday. We're going to do a show Saturday at noon time. So noon on Saturday, and because I'm suffering from brain fried syndrome, we're going to take Sunday off this week. So next show after tonight is Saturday at noon. Mark it down, and don't send me messages on Facebook asking me, is there a show tonight, tomorrow night.
Well, I think you deserve. We both deserve, but you especially deserve that Sunday day off because you are, as we all know, the hardest working person in weather.
Oh God, no, I'm not. Am I?
Well, all I know is that sometimes my phone will go ding ding at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm saying, my God, he's up already.
Dear Mrs. Rayo leaves the notifications turned on, doesn't she?
Well, she did. She is very concerned about your well-being. I mean, like, who else on the iPad gets lightning warnings for Blairsville, Georgia?
Well, I really do appreciate that, because God knows my family could care less, or couldn't care less.
She's always thinking about you. Oh my goodness. Oh, look at this. Joe is surrounded by thunderstorms. Oh, I said, well, why don't you get in the car, go down there and console him if you want.
It's fine. I'm used to it here. Believe me. It's good. So what Joe was referring to, folks, and I don't know, maybe this might work up in the Northeast. I don't know. I never tried it. So I have a dual heating system for the wintertime. I have electric heat, and my electricity is really cheap. Okay, it's really cheap. My electric bill averages about $70 a month, if that. Okay, so anyway, it's a dual system. So when the temperature goes below 40 degrees, the the propane kicks in and heats the house. So my propane tank was down to 40% and it's September, and I figured, okay, well, you know what? Why don't I top the tank? Oil has gone over $90 a barrel. I didn't know what propane was, so I call up the propane. I call up the local propane company, which is owned by Suburban Propane, which is a Northeast-based company. I hope they're not watching this show because somebody might get in trouble. Anyway, so I call up and I'm talking to the woman I'm talking to on the phone, and I ask her, well, how much is propane right now? And she says it's $3.40 per whatever it is cubic thing. Let's call it a gallon. So it's $3.40 a gallon. Okay, but I'm going to transfer you over to Beth. I want you to ask her to give you a lower price. And I was just so taken aback by that because, I mean, who says that? Particularly if you're calling up about electric or heat or anything like that. Who says that? And I said, wait a minute, let me get this straight. You're going to switch me over to this person, and I'm going to ask her to lower my price. She said, yeah, go ahead. I was like, all right. So I did exactly that, and she took $1 off per gallon.
Wow.
Okay, so from 340, it's now 240. And then she told me that if I paid my bill within 10 days, I'll get another 20 cents again, 20 cents off. So I was like, all right. So I just want everybody to know I got my delivery the other day. The bill posted on the website about 30 minutes ago, and I paid it. Okay, so I got the extra 20 cents too. But yeah, that's just sort of that was nice. I saved a couple of $100.
That's amazing. You got 35.3% off the regular price.
Yeah. And all I had to do was ask. So, you know what, everybody, call your local electric company, call your local heating oil company, and just say, can you give me a lower price? And I'm sure they'll cooperate. I'm sure they'll be jumping all over themselves trying to give you a lower price.
Well, that works in some cases. I mean, we were getting. Now, get this now, Joe.
You don't want to get that person in trouble.
No, but I mean, like we were getting the daily news, and on July 31st, they said that from August 1st till I think the 1st of October or November, the subscription rate per day for that time frame, that whole time frame, would be something like $350. Now, can you imagine paying $350 for your daily newspaper?
No.
To subscribe. So we almost instantaneously, we called the Daily News and said, goodbye. And then about a month later, they came back and they said, would you be interested in a price of something like $1 a week or something ridiculous? And of course, we took that offer. So, all it amounts to is that if you turn them down or turn a company down or whatever, because you think the prices are too high, they may very well come back with a much better price. Maybe not immediately, but sometime down the road.
Yeah, I guess, strange times we live in. All right. Hurricane Lee is moving right along. I didn't see anything that changes anyone's mind today in terms of where this is going and what it's going to be doing. It has continued to spread out as a tropical system. It is amazing to me. The area of gales, Joe, goes out, I think, when I last looked, I looked at the 5 o'clock advisory, and I forgot what the numbers were, so I'm calling it up again on my other screen here, so this way I don't mess up the show. And on the marine advisory, so hurricane force winds extend 90 miles to the northeast, 80 miles to the southeast, 70 miles to the southwest, and 80 miles to the northwest. The 50 knot winds, 170 northeast and southeast, 120 southwest and northwest. The gales,
Wow.
the 34, the gales, 300 miles to the northeast and 300 miles to the southeast, 200 miles to the southwest, and 210 miles to the northwest. That is, that's big. That's a lot. I mean, we're talking almost 400 miles across. Well, I'm sorry,
Right.
500 miles across from the gales. 300, and even the 50 knot winds. 170 and 120 is northeast to southwest is 290 miles. I mean, that's incredible, really.
That is, and it shows you the overall width or girth of this storm. And not only in terms of wind, Joe, but it still looks like to me that we're going to begin to see high clouds in our sky later in the day tomorrow. I'm talking about right in the Hudson Valley. You folks who live further to the east of New York City will already see those clouds earlier in the day. But when we get to Saturday, it looks like the day will start rather cloud-filled, but if this thing accelerates more to the north and east, we may see the clouds give way back to sunshine by later in the day on Saturday. But the fact that the storm center is so far away, even to the fact that we're being touched by cloud cover from this, is quite amazing.
Yeah, no, it really is. Now, it'd be great if we could get somebody that lives near the Bay of Fundy for Saturday. You know
Oh,
any?
maybe there's
Do you anybody? Do you know anybody up there?
no, I don't know anybody up there. I mean, this is back in 1989 when we visited Nova Scotia and we saw the tidal bore, which really wasn't boring, but I mean, we saw the tidal bore associated with the Bay of Fundy. I do not know anybody there, but I could always check around and see if there's any kind of radio station. And maybe like we did last year with Fiona, we can call the station up and talk to somebody there and ask them how things going.
Yeah, I was reading an article today because I was trying to find out. I was trying to find at least some story that might at least point to, what could happen up there. I didn't really see a whole lot. I did find one story that did talk about the tides in the Bay of Fundy and in a spot on the west side of Nova Scotia. I forgot the name of the place, but there's like the Bay of Fundy. There's like a finger that sort of pokes inland into Nova Scotia, and they said that the record was 75 feet from low tide to high tide. Normally it's 50, and the record is 75, and it goes back to, I think it was 1858, something that was called the Saxby.
the Saxby
Gale. Yeah.
That's 1869.
1869. Okay.
Yeah. That's a legendary storm in Atlantic Canada, and they call it the Saxby Gale because there was a gentleman, Stephen Martin Saxby, in England, who made a prediction in the local London newspaper that there was going to be a massive storm coinciding with the new moon of October 1869 and would cause tremendous tidal flooding and all sorts of stuff. So everybody asked, who read that article or read that letter, said, well, where is he making the reference to? Here in England? Or what is he talking about? And Mr. Saxby wrote back, and they printed his letter saying it could be anywhere in the world.
Oh, well, we narrowed it down.
That really narrowed it down indeed.
Yeah, he apparently was ridiculed by there was a Royal Academy of Meteorologists at the time under Queen Victoria, and they were not amused.
Well, the thing is that there was a gentleman who wrote a weekly weather column in a newspaper in Halifax, and he saw the prediction by his name was Frederick Allison, and he saw the prediction by Saxby. Somehow or other, that prediction got back to him all the way across the big pond, and he actually believed it. He actually went in his newspaper column and wrote a few days before the date, I think it was October 5th, 1869, he said there's going to be a major storm that's going to cause all kinds of mayhem and high tides and flooding and everything else. And he wrote this, and it happened. It turned out that the Saxby gale was probably, well, maybe something like what we're seeing right now with Lee, a Category 1 or Category 2 hurricane that made landfall in down East Maine and then eventually crossed over into New Brunswick and brought all kinds of crazy weather to Nova Scotia. Now, the interesting thing is, if Mr. Allison was expecting to become famous for actually publishing his prediction in that newspaper column that he wrote, it never happened. Instead, when the storm hit Nova Scotia, everybody instantaneously said, "Oh, it's the Saxby storm, the Saxby gale." So Saxby became famous because of that storm system, even though he never really nailed down where he expected the storm to be. Again, he said, could be anywhere, because the new moon was at perigee, and he anticipated that would mean that the tidal conditions would be much higher or worse than normal. And he also, I guess, assumed that that would also somehow set off a big storm somewhere. But he never indicated where the storm could be. It could be anywhere in the world. But when it hit Nova Scotia, everybody said, it's the Saxby storm, even though the prediction in Nova Scotia was published not by Saxby, but by somebody else. But that somebody is, nobody remembers him,
Right.
but everybody remembers Saxby.
Well, New Brunswick, Canada guy on the chat board says I'm just across the border from Holton, Maine, and they're saying 2 to 4 inches of rain here and 60 to 90 kilometers per hour wind gusts. Yeah, I guess that's certainly possible, and certainly, one of the things that I did see a number of articles that they were, from that area in Atlantic Canada. It's been a really wet summer there. Well, there's a shocker. I mean, we know what's gone on in Vermont, New Hampshire, and also in Maine, with a lot of rain this summer. But that also extended up into Atlantic Canada. They seem to be far more worried about the rain because they said the ground is so saturated that it's all just going to run off. So you've got that. You've got a potential track of the center going through the Bay of Fundy. We're just coming off. What did we just? It was a new moon, right? So we just came off the
Right.
new moon. So this is pushing a lot. This is coming up the whole Atlantic seaboard and pushing a whole lot of water northward. So yeah, this could wind up being a serious situation for that area in Atlantic Canada and the Gulf of Maine. So we'll see how it goes. A bit of good news from that respect, though, is the fact that they did, because of the fact that Lee is moving the way it is and the track is a little bit further offshore, they had a storm surge watch up for Cape Cod and for Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. They have taken that down. They have also, the Hurricane Center has taken down tropical storm watches that were up from the watches that were up for Rhode Island back to Watch Hill, Rhode Island. Those are taken down. So it's basically tropical storm warnings. I'm sorry, Joe. Just give me a minute here. I'm having just a little bit of a difficulty. I'm trying to bring up. There we go. I was trying to bring up my software because I wanted to switch over to a map, and it was not letting me. But here's the Hurricane Center's latest advisory. This is the 5 p.m. Let's see if the 8 p.m. is there. No, not yet. 31.7, 68.3 was 68.4, so it's probably moving just slightly east of due north, so 005 degrees, my guess is. Top winds are 85 miles per hour. It's just about even with the latitude of Bermuda, which has been getting gales all day long. You see the orange area that they have drawn around it pretty much reflects the area of gales, and the darker brown in the middle around the X is where your hurricane force winds are. And the forecast track is kind of northeast, and then it turns north, and it never really makes that hook back west anymore. It'll probably do it to a slight degree, but they have it as a post-tropical storm just south of the west coast of Nova Scotia, and then turning northeastward, which would sort of track it right through the Bay of Fundy, and then on up northeast to the western part of through New Brunswick, the western part of across the Gulf of St. Lawrence, the western part of Newfoundland, and then on its way to the northeast from there. So I guess we'll see how long the tropical nature of the system survives. At the end of the day, it really doesn't make that much of a difference whether this is tropical or post-tropical. They're going to get what they're going to get anyway, in either way. The tropical storm warnings go all the way up to Eastport, Maine, to the Canadian border, and I believe, you see, they still have. So they still have the hurricane watch up from Stonington, Maine to the U.S.-Canadian border. And then they have a hurricane watch from the U.S.-Canada border to Point Lepreau, including Grand Manan Island. Nova Scotia from Digby to Medway Harbor. Have you been to either of those two places, Joe?
No,
Digby or Medway? Okay, no.
Not really. Now, the interesting thing is that I always thought that the National Hurricane Center issued all of these watches and advisories or whatever for an impending storm, but apparently that only goes or holds true for the U.S. Now,
right.
We mentioned
that's Atlantic.
Night.
That's Canada. They do those separately? And then they must have coordinated it when they were doing the graphics today.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
Yeah. And the tropical storm watch from New Brunswick north of Point Lepreau to Fort Lawrence. The Nova Scotia west coast from north of Digby to Fort Lawrence. Nova Scotia southeast coast north of Medway Harbor to Point Tupper. Okay, so that covers the extent of watches and warnings both on the Canada side and on the U.S. side. And with respect to kind of showing these hurricane tracking models, they're all bunched up there. Most of them take it right along the west coast of Nova Scotia and into the Bay of Fundy, and then making the turn. None of them are hooking it. There's no outliers anymore, so none of them are hooking it back to the northwest in any way, shape, or form. So that at least. That at least it lessens the problem a bit for southeastern New England that the center is going to pass as far east as it is. And also for eastern New England to an extent, but for southeastern New England in particular, they're not going to have something that's going to be like within 60 or 70 miles. The center being 60 or 70 miles from them.
Well, it's going to be a hit or miss, not a hit or miss, but it'll be a one-shot hit for western Nova Scotia. Not sure. I'm sure they'll get some breezy conditions and wet weather all the way over on the far eastern side of the province, but it looks like the folks who live, on the west side of Nova Scotia are going to be the ones that are going to get the worst of this, and maybe a place like Eastport, Maine, which it almost immediately borders the borderline with New Brunswick. They'll get hit pretty hard as well.
The forecast track for Lee laid over the ocean water temperatures today, and Lee is now a Category 1 hurricane, but it's also moving over ocean water temperatures that are running at about 26 Celsius or 78, 79 degrees Fahrenheit, which can support a tropical storm or a strong, a high-end tropical storm, but barely a Category 1. And then it's going to cross the ribbon of the Gulf Stream. All right, but the thing is, at that point, it's that ribbon of the Gulf Stream, Joe, is maybe 60 miles. So if the center is moving at that when it gets there at 20 miles an hour, it's literally going to spend all of 3 hours over a ribbon of 28 sea water. I doubt that's going to do much of anything in just 3 hours' time. And then, of course, immediately emerging out of the Gulf Stream, when it gets to about 38 or 39 north, the water temperatures really drop significantly, even though the water temperatures are above normal in the Gulf of Maine and off the southern New England coast and off of southeastern New England. They're still well beholden to the threshold to support anything more than either a high-end tropical storm or at the highest would be, a minimal Category 1 75-mile-an-hour hurricane.
And the forward speed is just a little bit too fast for any kind of injection of warmer water into the system. And you're right. Once it's in, no sooner is it in, it's out. And it's not just that, but the temperature drop off from that ribbon of very warm water to much cooler water is so dramatic. And that's why you could see there on the map, it goes from a 1 and then just goes down to a tropical storm during the following cycle, which I guess is 12 hours later.
55 likes, 56 likes so far. Thank you very much for those of you who hit the like button. If you like the show, Joe and Joe Weather Show, we love it when you hit the like button. If we get to over 100 likes, Joe and I usually celebrate after the show. So please get us to 100 likes. It would really be nice. All right, there's not really a whole lot new here in terms of the models are pretty much very consistent here. Here's the GFS, that northeast, and then it turns more northerly, sort of bends back northwestward. This is tomorrow night, where the storm at this point, they're still showing a 958 pressure on the GFS. So I wonder whether there's, maybe there'll be a little bit of baroclinic deepening that goes on from the upper trough that's driving all of this. 38.4 and 66.3 is a rough estimate here of where the L is on the GFS. And that's about, seven, what is that? New York is at what, 70, 71?
72? 73.8. New York?
73. So that's over, that's almost 400 miles to the southeast of New York City.
Yeah.
That's pretty far out. And then if you believe this, by Saturday morning, the low is at 42. This is at 8 a.m. Saturday. Guesstimate off the GFS is 42 and about 66.5. And the Cape Cod is right on 70. So 3.5 degrees times 6, that's about 210 miles to the east of the Cape. So they'll have gales there, certainly. And they'll have gales, obviously, along the east coast of Massachusetts and of course, along coastal Maine. And then it's got that northwest to where it's offshore to the west of the west coast of Nova Scotia. This is by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, so this will be a great time for us to do the noon show, if this is right. 43.2 and 66.7. And then it starts to turn northeast from there as it moves into the Bay of Fundy. By Saturday evening, it's at 44.2 and 67. So all the models are like that. It's hard to imagine. That's quite a target to hit, though, when you think about it. From where this hurricane has been, you look at the Bay of Fundy, which is really, compared to the whole ocean, is just this sliver, all right, this absolute sliver of water that cuts in, and yet the models keep aiming for that sliver, for the storm to take that track. And in the meantime, you're going to have the hurricane funneling down. All this on the backside. We shouldn't forget the fact that on the backside is going to be all this dry air that's going to be coming down, and that's going to get pretty far south into the Carolinas and through all of the Mid-Atlantic states and back through the Ohio Valley. So we've been playing up this idea of all the low dew points, and that we certainly saw that today, and that's going to be reinforced as that hurricane moves northward.
Yes, absolutely, and you're absolutely right about the fact that it's almost like threading the needle, so to speak, between extreme eastern Maine and the west coast of Nova Scotia. That this storm is actually going to just kind of like right in between, right into the entrance of the Bay of Fundy. It is kind of wild that it's actually going to do that, but that's what a lot of the models are suggesting. And you're right, Joe. Compared to the Atlantic Ocean, it's really just a little sliver of waterway, but Lee looks like it's going to go through that over the weekend.
Johnny Quest hitting Super Chat tonight. Thank you for hitting the Super Chat tip jar, Johnny. And he says, according to the AP, the death toll in Libya is now over 11,000, with 20,000 still missing. And that was from that Medicaine, Daniel. They call them Medicanes. And I was doing a little research on that, and they're not as uncommon as you think. And they have an odd season. Their highest peak, the the peak months are from September to January. June and July, and into August, it's too dry because of the seasonal winds that bring the hot air from the Sahara that kind of goes up into southern parts of Europe. That's all very dry air. But as you get into the months of September and beyond, the activity picks up. And from time to time, they've discovered that there've been these tropical or tropical-like cyclones that develop in the Mediterranean Sea and even in the Black Sea. There's been there's history of storms that have formed in this way. So they're uncommon, but they're not unusual, and we've seen them in the past couple of years, because I remember we've done a couple of shows where we were talking about what was going on there in the Mediterranean with what looks like a tropical storm. And the other thing is, interestingly enough, they don't have an official weather agency that puts out advisories. So,
Yeah.
I mean, given that, well, first of all, you have the Eurozone countries, but there's no one country that's responsible for. I think one country is responsible for the western part of the Caribbean, and then another part is not the Caribbean, the Mediterranean, and the Hellenic Weather Service from Greece covers the central and the eastern part. And when these storms pop up, they'll issue advisories, but it's not like the Hurricane Center advisories, which then get distributed to all the press and to media. It's a little more primitive there with regards to disseminating that sort of information. So I mean, I don't know Libya's a mess, because apparently the country's split in two and they've got two governments, and they probably don't have much in the way of a system or an agency that deals with severe weather events and that kind of thing. So it's very sad. You see some of those pictures from there have been, pretty horrific. But
well, 11,000 fatalities and still 20,000 unaccounted for.
Yeah,
That's something.
That's very sad. Well, here's what the surface map looks like tonight. We've got the stalled stationary boundary that's sitting offshore, and that's saving eastern PA to southern New England, even down to the mid-Atlantic states and the Carolinas, kind of the protective wall. And Lee is going to be moving. Lee's going to pretty much track close to that frontal boundary, and then the boundary's going to sort of bend back or fade away on the northern part when it starts to make that hook to the northwest. Otherwise, nice dry air. Nice high there, sitting up in Michigan. I'm seeing 40 dew points down into Kentucky. Dew points in the 50s, and even some 40 dew points, Joe, in Tennessee. Nashville at 5 o'clock this afternoon was 82 with a dew point of 43.
Wow.
My dew points here, probably got down to about 60 or so. And it's still, a little higher when you get down to South Georgia. It's still, up over 70, and there the temperatures got close to 90. I didn't get much above the low 70s today. It was really a lot of clouds all day long, so that held the temperatures down just a bit. And there's not really a whole lot happening when we look forward, because of the fact that you've got Lee out there, so this high holds for a while, and that takes us into Saturday. And you can see the isobars. There's actually quite a few isobars there from Lee in the Gulf of Maine back to the last isobar is somewhere in southern New Jersey. So if you're in eastern Long Island, if you're in eastern Connecticut, Rhode Island, those areas there, you're certainly going to have pretty gusty winds. And I think you'll probably see some decent wind gusts during the day on Saturday on the backside of this.
I would believe so. Because a lot of times, especially in a situation like this, the models tend to underperform. So I think that this will indeed provide for inland sections of Hudson Valley even 30-mile-per-hour wind gusts on Saturday. And I wouldn't be surprised if you had the odd hour where a gust reached up to 35 or 38 or maybe even touched 40. We'll see. But it is going to be a gusty, windy Saturday and a rather breezy day when we get to tomorrow.
I'm going to have a little bit of rain this weekend here in Georgia. And just looking at the upper air, you could see the trough that's in the western lakes down through the Mississippi Valley, and then the upper low that represents Lee in the Gulf of Maine. This is for Saturday afternoon. That's going to pivot out to the northeast as the trough behind it swings through, and that brings a cold front here probably sometime Sunday night. So there'll be a reinforcement of the cool, dry air into next week. And then as we go through next week, there's a bit of a ridge that builds from Texas northeastward into the St. Lawrence Valley. And there's something out there in the ocean south of Nova Scotia. There's some troughing there. And then you've got this, some sort of, the trough in the west. You got a deep trough that drives down in the western part of the U.S. During next week, which is probably going to bring some snow to the northern Rockies, first first flakes of the season. And then the upper low swings eastward. But then we've got this is September 24th, 25th, Joe, big cutoff, 591 high, sitting right along the mid-Atlantic coast in the upper atmosphere. So we're going into a ridge position here after the middle of next week. So we'll probably have a couple of days where it gets very warm again, or maybe by late September standards downright hot for a day or two. And then after that, you've got another trough. After that, toward the end of the month, there's a deeper upper low that starts to come down from the northwest. We'll see how real that is, with the ridge going back into the western part of the United States. But in the medium term, after we get through the middle part of next week, we are going to go into that ridge position. So it looks like we may turn very warm and maybe eventually more humid.
Now, Liam Pravitsky asks an interesting question. What will the tide situation be when Lee enters the Bay of Fundy? Now, I have found on this, so this is one of the positive things. I say a lot of negative things sometimes about the internet, because sometimes you get people who pose as knowledgeable people and post messages which cause all kinds of mayhem. But this is one of those times when you really like the fact that this information is right at hand. All you need to do is just type in on whatever browser you're looking at. I found a website, Bay of Fundy Tide Times. Now, assuming that the National Hurricane Center is correct and that Lee is going to be entering the Bay of Fundy, the mouth of the Bay of Fundy, sometime around 8 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time on Saturday evening.
Right.
What would the tidal situation be? Well, first of all, at 7:32 p.m. on Saturday, they actually have low tide, not high tide. So the tide cycle would seem to indicate that they're going to be nearer to a low tide situation when Lee arrives Saturday evening, as opposed to a high tide. Now, get this, Joe, the low tide is indicated here to be 1.2 meters. Now, a meter is 39.37 inches. So if you multiply that by 1.2, that gives you 47.244 inches. And since 12 inches are in a 12 inches equal 1 foot, so divide that by 12. So that the height of the tide, at least according to this website, the Bay of Fundy, is 3.9 feet. That doesn't really sound all that significant. However, the high tide, which would come in the afternoon, early afternoon on Saturday, 7.24 meters, and that would be divided by 12 that's 23.7 feet. So it goes from, high tide would be 23.75 feet in the early afternoon, but then presumably it drops down to only about 3 or 4 feet for low tide Saturday evening. So I guess if you're thinking about possible disastrous situation, the storm, at least the way it's projected right now, would be arriving just at the right time, just when the tides are going down, and will be near low tide.
Well, that'd be good. Now, if it winds up being 6 hours faster, which is, certainly not out of the realm of possibility, then you could have a whole different outcome.
Absolutely. So early afternoon, high tide on Saturday. Early evening, low tide on Saturday.
All right. Let's do a little Briller Jeopardy, shall we?
Yes.
Okay.
Surely.
So, chat board. Scott Briller sent this one. This will be fun. So we're gonna starting with the letter A, and he didn't go to every letter, but he did give a bunch. So based on the using these letters, so what is the strongest hurricane beginning with the following letters? And we will start with the letter A. A. A is in apple. Okay.
Well, the one I would think of immediately is the one with 190-mile-per-hour winds that we mentioned the other day, Allen.
Well, Patrick Darcy, everybody's going the other way, Joe. Everybody's saying Andrew. Darcy Bertona, Rosenberg Quest, Cassia DeCara, Roll Cardillo, Frank R., Grace, Miss Fallerite, John Melander, Phil G., Latex Dream says Alphonse.
Alphonse.
Yes. Frank, Andrew.
That sounds like a D'Amato to me.
Alan Rupa is the first one to say the correct answer, as you said the correct answer, Joe, and that's Allen in 1980. Allen,
yep.
Allen, was the strongest A storm. And it's not about whether it was the strongest at landfall, just in terms of wherever it was on its life cycle that it hit that intensity. Leon Probitsky hits the tip jar. Thank you, Leon, for hitting Super Chat tonight. Most appreciated. So the next letter, Joe, is the letter. This is is the letter C. And there have been a lot of.
Would it be Camille?
Would it be Camille? Well, let's see what the chat board thinks about the letter C. And we have Charlie. Johnny Quest says Camille. Cardillo says Camille. Noah Dude says Camille. Who's Noah Dude? Could that be somebody from WPC? Because you know how they love to watch the Joe and Joe weather show. They even buy buttered popcorn and use real butter when they watch the Joe and Joe weather show. Camille, Cassia, Helen Bertona, Chris O'Shaughnessy, Leon Probitsky, and on and on. Yes, Camille is the sea storm. Okay, Camille is the sea storm. All right, so the next letter, I believe, if I can get my mouse there, is the letter G. The letter G.
G?
G.
Okay.
As in Gorgeous George. The letter G.
Well, I know it's not Gert because we just had a Gert. G.
G. Well, I'll give you some of the chat board says George. Says Carol DeCara. Gloria from Pat BFD. Gilligan. I like that from Sting Floyd. Rich Rothmansky. Gilbert.
Helen Bertona, yeah.
Helen Bertona says Gloria.
No, she didn't. She said Gilbert.
No, I have her here, Joe. I'm looking at it. Helen Bertona, Gloria. Unless she put it twice. Conroy Jet says Gaston. Ray Next 12 Gustav. Northern Grace says Gilbert. I like Gilligan. That was a good one. And
that's
nothing.
That's the only one that when it makes landfall, Hurricane Gilligan.
Yeah, right. Exactly. No, that's an out to sea one. It just meanders out in the ocean somewhere.
But it makes landfall and it says Skipper.
Yes, Gilbert is the correct answer. Gilbert. Now he backtracks here, Joe. The letter D.
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 The letter D. The letter D. Frank R. says David. Noah Dude says Dorian. Helen Bertona got it here. Dean. Hurricane Dean.
Wow.
And Dean, I believe, was in 2007. Okay. The J. The letter J.
The
letter J.
Could it be Jose?
No, that's not right.
No, all right. How
I
come there's
had,
never been a
I
How
had,
come there's never been a Hurricane Joe or Joseph?
I don't understand that. Really.
Yeah,
I know the East Pacific has had John, but they've never had Joe.
no.
Sandy Blue Ocean says Jane. I don't think there's ever been a Jane. There hasn't been a John. There hasn't. I don't know if there's been a Gene. Um, Jasper, Jerry, Javier, Josephine. Rainix and Janice Branker. That's new to the chat board. They both got it right. This was in 1955, Joe, Hurricane Janet, and also noteworthy about Hurricane Janet, which went into, I believe it was Belize, went straight across the Caribbean and went in as a Cat 5. Um, that was the first hurricane where they were flying reconnaissance aircraft and they lost the plane went down in the storm.
Wow.
Well, yeah, that was the first. That I believe is the one time that they lost a reconnaissance aircraft. Was it
Incidentally,
Hurricane Janet?
on the ABC Evening News tonight, they had a report from Ginger Z, who did a report on Lee from one of the Hurricane Hunter aircraft. She was actually on board the Hurricane Hunter aircraft, and Ron and I were talking about this, and I said, "Well, good for Ginger Z." I said, "I wonder if she volunteered or they assigned her to get on board that flight." Renata thinks that maybe she volunteered. I know that Renata probably would volunteer too. I would not go on a Hurricane Hunter flight. And she said, well, I think Joe Cioffi did. And I said, no, I don't
No,
think Joe ever did. And I think Joe would not
no,
volunteer. Uh,
no. Even when I was younger, I guess maybe if I could have was in my 20s, I might have thought about it, but no, I had no desire to one. I listen. I get so I get so motion sickness very, very easy. I mean, I used to get queasy when my wife had too many waves in her hair. So no, I'm not doing that. The letter K. The letter K.
well, it would have to, I would say the first one for K would be Katrina, but I
And
could be wrong.
you could be wrong. It's quite possible. I would say somewhat unlikely, but it is possible. If you are wrong, Joe, then Patrick Darcy is wrong. Michael Azera is wrong. Kenneth Rosenberg is wrong. Jason Schaefer is wrong. Frank is wrong. Carol DeCara is wrong. Rock Roll is wrong. Leon is wrong. Helen Bertona is wrong. Noah Dude is wrong. And John Melander is wrong. But guess what? They're not wrong. They're right. It's Katrina.
Yay.
M.
Stink Floyd, by the way, said Kong.
Yeah. M.
M.
As in Mary. But not Mary.
I would think it would be my daughter.
Maria. Well,
Maria.
either Maria or what Frank R. says, which is Mitch.
Mitch.
And the answer is, my chat board stopped moving now. So the answer is
Marilyn.
is Mitch. Mitch. The letter
It's Mitch.
Yes. The letter R.
The letter R.
R.
Ronaldo.
Ronaldo. Rainex, Johnny Quest, Michael Azera, Frank Scalera, Northern Grace, Patrick Darcy all say Rita. So does the Sellout 19, Conroy Jet, Carol DeCara, Helen Bertona, Maggie P, Noah Dude, Chuck Cardillo, Sandy Blue Ocean. You typo there, but I know that's what you meant. John Melander, Dennis Cassia. Oh, Dennis Cassia says Rita. It's got to be Rita, Joe. So the answer is, I'm going to stop right there. The answer is R, is Rita. And the last one tonight is the letter I. I.
Isaac.
Isaac. Well, that does start with the letter I, but unfortunately, Joe, that is not the correct answer.
It couldn't be. It's a Ia.
Ian, Helen Bertona, Conroy Jet, Ivan or Yvonne, Rich Rothmansky, Ivan or Yvonne. A number of people are putting Ivan or Yvonne. Ida from Jason Schaefer and Jason Schaefer and Northern Grace. Irene from Rain-X2. Ida, Isabel. Noah Dude, and Dennis Cassia have hit it, Joe. Irma from
Irma.
just a few
I've got
years
an Aunt
ago.
Irma. How can I have forgotten Aunt Irma?
It's Irma.
Yes.
And that is the last letter tonight. So we've gone through them all. Well, that was interesting.
Yeah, it was good.
Yep. All right.
Killed 5 minutes.
Yes, it did. 108 likes. Thank you for those of you who hit the like button. And the Joe and Joe Weather Show tonight, brought to you by Tempest by WeatherFlow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system and join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. And you can use the coupon code I want a weather station for anything you purchase on the Tempest website. If you do, you will get
10% off.
Omni True Value Hardware is at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. 631-756-1125 is the telephone number. They have the best prices in town. Make sure you have Omni, the address and phone number down this coming winter, because they are Long Island and probably the tri-state area's largest rock salt source. And the website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
All right, so no show tomorrow night, folks, but we will be here Saturday around at noontime to cover the landfalling or possible landfalling Lee in Atlantic Canada, or maybe outside chance it touches the center touches eastern Maine, but we'll cover it all. So hopefully we'll see you then.
We'll be here. I'll be here. Just make sure you're there.
Yes. Nighty night.
Night.